hey, you can run this business, you can do this thing that you are putting so much time and effort, into, but it doesn't have to be, or it doesn't have to come at a self-sacrifice.
Hi everyone, Elle Ballard is here today on our Empowered Global Women in Business podcast. I am excited to introduce to you our next guest today, La'Vista Jones. Hi, La'Vista.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us. I am
Oh,
excited.
thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I am excited for this conversation because I share a similar kind of background with La'Vista. So I love talking about those things, and I'm looking forward for this. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to introduce La'Vista properly. So La'Vista Jones is a certified coach, six-time author, host of the Boss Talk podcast, and professional speaker with a message that challenges others to shift the way they engage with their work and care for themselves in the process. Her latest book, The Boss Shift, a literally blueprint for implementing her signature framework that fuses systemization and self-care into practical self-preserving strategies for work-life balance. I love that. As a corporate dropout and burnout survivor turned entrepreneur, La'Vista is the founder and CEO of 31 Marketplace,
Mhm.
an agency passionate about providing solutions for ambitious visionaries to amplify their impact without sacrificing themselves to do it. Through her company's initiative, The Amplify Effect, La'Vista and her team are on a mission to help these change agents bridge the gap between innovation and influence through sustainable podcasting. Although she's a proud native of Ohio, La'Vista currently resides in Arizona with her husband Stuart, their son, publicly known as the Cub, and Bull Mastiff puppy Atlas.
Mhm. Yes. Which
Welcome.
I'm sure he is upset that he was kicked out of the office so that I could do this podcast in peace because he's like, why can't I be in there with you right now?
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, so he's right at the door.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, like we shared earlier, used to live in Arizona, so we are neighbors, but welcome again. Beautiful. So my first question I usually like to ask after I introduce my guest, and I'm always curious as to how and why you chose this line of work.
Yeah, so on the coaching and like system and self-care side of the work that I do, you mentioned that I am a corporate dropout, right? And when I started working for myself and working with private clients, I started noticing the habits that a lot of these women have that were bad habits that I still had from like my life in corporate, right? The
Mm.
not sleeping, working until 3 a.m., just kind of pushing themselves and adhering to like this grind, team no sleep, those kind of things. And I realized, well, wait a second, if I don't step in a sense and help them see like, hey, you can run this business, you can do this thing that you are putting so much time and effort, into, but it doesn't have to be, or it doesn't have to come at a self-sacrifice. And so like that is what kind of inspired me to do the work because I had experienced my own burnout situation, and I know that it was just like having this complicated relationship with work. Like I loved what I did, but I didn't take good care of myself to be able to really do the work the way that I wanted to. And so with women business owners, like I didn't want them to have the same fate, if you will, and not spend all this time and energy and resources into building a business that they would potentially resent because they're burnt out and exhausted.
I love that. Yeah, I agree with that. I remember as you were describing, I remembered my weekends
Yeah.
for finishing, projects and taking time away from the family just to finish some of the projects when I was back in corporate. So I can totally relate to that. I love that.
Well,
Yeah.
my weekends for about 4 years, my husband used to joke that it was his joint visitation with like the company, right? Like he had joint visitation with me, and that like my salary was basically like his spousal support, for, me being here because I was always gone. I traveled a lot, and so I would be home on the weekends trying to catch up on sleep and doing laundry just to repack and head to the airport again on Monday. So it
Wow.
was just like we were newlyweds, and it was just like we had no time together. And it's like that, like looking back, like that's totally not newlywed goals if I had had to really do that again, because, you get married to kind of spend your life with this person. And it was like,
Yeah.
I'll see you on Friday. I'm gonna leave on Monday.
Yeah.
So it was
Oh.
crazy. Yeah.
And so now that you are building a business to help women who feel overburdened and just really create this work-life balance of people, how do you do that? Like what is part of that work that you do?
Yeah, so it really is kind of leveraging the framework that I have and that I talk about more in the book, and even like the podcast that I have. BOSS really is an acronym for me in the business, which means battling overwhelm with systems and self-care, right? So it's first kind of like changing your mindset that you're done with the busyness. Like that there's a different way for you to approach and like engage with like your work and your rest and caring for yourself, and you're tired of doing it the way that you're doing it, right? So
Yeah.
starting with the mindset, really like naming the stuff that's overwhelming you. Is it pride of not wanting to raise your hand and saying, "Hey, I need help with this"? Is it, something I call like boss shame, feeling like, because you're the boss or because you're the executive, you should have all the answers,
Mhm.
right? So like what is that thing that actually is overwhelming you? That thing that's like suffocating you kind of like in your own life, and then how do we leverage both systems and self-care to like make things easier for you? How do
Ah,
we make things easier for your business? How do we make things easier for your life? And then how do you incorporate that genuine self-care as more of like a lifestyle versus like this thing you just kind of check off of like your list every day, right? Because, that's not going to fulfill you or sustain you for a long time if it's like, oh, I self-care today, I'm good. But it's like, how are you actually living your life? What kind of boundaries do you have in place? Like those kind of things that take care of you on a day-to-day kind of a basis. So it really is working with the women that I work with, using that approach with really everything.
that's awesome. And that, it's so interesting how, and I know that for myself as well, this addiction to just like working. And I know when I've started building a business, I felt that I had to bring in additional so many hours.
Hmm.
And I don't know, it's a feeling of, it's a habit of, because I've done that, then I will get this result unless I work this many hours. And then I remember there was a day when I took the time, I just woke up with this just feeling of I don't want to do it today. And I decided not to do it. I decided to honor my wishes and thoughts. And I still made a sale that day, right? And
Yep.
so that's when I realized in my business that it's a little bit of a different animal. And of course there is time for action and work, and there is time for that self-care and those kind of activities. And that brings me to the next question
Mm.
of, when you started building your own business, there are so many challenges that come up, right, in building a business. Some of them are similar to the corporate, being an employee, but then some of them are completely different. I remember, however, discovering those, right, in the process too. What are some of the lessons that you learned in building a business?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that one of the main ones is that vision isn't a solo gig, right? Like I think that I spent a lot of time in corporate, as a independent contributor for a good majority of my career, and then, moved more into like management when I took like an executive office.
Mhm.
But working for myself, you know, I had this vision of like what I wanted to do, the work that I wanted to do. And, similar to like you were talking about, like, okay, I've got to work so much and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. I realized I can't do this, by myself. I can't actually get to where I'm needing to go on my own. And so like that's a lesson that I feel like I have to keep front of mind like every day, right? Like I can't do this by myself. Like I'm not designed to do this by myself. One of the other ones is realizing that I didn't have to, I guess, kind of prove my value as an entrepreneur by like what I produced, right? Because I don't totally feel that like that was the kind of culture and what the expectation was in my corporate life that, if I wasn't staying up all night and being able to deliver X, Y, and Z, like somehow I wasn't valuable enough or I wasn't worthy enough. And I realized, what I'm creating on my own, like I bring value to the table just because I am who I am.
Ah,
Right? And so I don't have to work myself to the bone to prove that to anybody.
mhm.
And that was a harder lesson to learn because I feel like, for me, I was so conditioned that like if I don't produce, they're not going to know that I'm great. If I don't produce, they're not going to see my magic. If I don't do this, they're not going to think that I'm anybody, of value that they should listen to or come to or seek help from. And it's just like, no, that's not true. Actually, I'm more of a value by modeling that you can have everything that you want on your own terms and still take care of yourself at the same time. Like both of those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can have both.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
Both of them are so true, so true. Yeah, the fact that we cannot build it alone, no matter what the vision is, right, how big it is. And then the worthiness, that's my one of the favorite like reasons building a business and building my own journey and this self-expansion
Mhm.
myself, and how with every step this worthiness keeps coming up and gets
Yes.
questioned. And it's different, right? It levels, but it's just so true. And that's I think one of the things that I love in building something on my own, because of this expansion of myself that I
Yeah.
never experienced when I was working. And yeah, but beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you for asking.
Okay, so I do want to talk about a little bit about your book.
Okay.
You mentioned in the introduction, and I think you've touched on it again. And I know you will be sharing a little bit with us, and you will elaborate what that will be. But if you could share a little bit about the book with our listeners.
So the book itself really kind of walks the reader through that framework I was talking about, that battling overwhelm with systems and self-care. And
Mhm.
it really starts off with like what I consider the boss mantra, right? And it's a series of these affirmations that I really want the reader to kind of adopt kind of as their own. One of them, I think it starts off with like, I am done glorifying busyness. Right? Because like that's one of those things I think that we as entrepreneurs are just like, hey, if I'm not grinding, right, or in like this hustle mode, somehow I'm not doing this right. And it's just like,
Yes.
yeah, like there's a difference between being busy and being productive and actually like moving the
Yes.
needle forward in your business. And busyness ain't it.
Yeah.
It's not it. So it's really kind of adopting that mantra. And like I said, shifting your mindset first to realize like, hey, I don't have to sacrifice myself in order to do what I want to do with this business and make the impact that I want to make. And then it really walks the readers through identifying what their particular overwhelm is because I feel like it's different for everybody and it changes. Like I think that as you evolve, as your business evolves, you start feeling weighed down and overwhelmed by different things. So, I talk about a handful of things that I identified in this particular book that I think are pretty common, especially with the women that I had worked with. And then it walks through what I feel like are really tangible things that you can start practicing from the system side and the self-care side. And, the book is written, I feel like, for every woman, if that makes sense, right? Like if you're a stay-at-home mom, you use systems, whether you call it that or realize that's what you're doing or not. There's a certain way that you get your children up, you get them, all of their bathroom stuff done, getting them dressed, getting them fed, get them packed up and out of the house for school. That's a system. It's what are the steps that you're using to get from point A to point B to get something done, right? So moms use systems, entrepreneurs use systems, corporate, leaders use systems, but how are we using those systems more efficiently every day, right? How are we leveraging automation? How are we using them to like just make our lives easier
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis so that we have and invite some of that ease into our lives and we're still able to get stuff done and we're still able to value the hard work that we do, but everything doesn't have to be hard. Everything doesn't have to be so time consuming. And then, the self-care piece is really challenging the reader to like reconnect with like what brings them authentic joy. Because, right, my self-care is going to be different than yours. It's going to be different than anybody else who's listening to your show. And so it's like approaching it from the love languages. Like, are you familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman's five love languages?
Yeah.
So it's like reconnecting with those or connecting with them again if you've, maybe taken that assessment, a while ago and really tapping into how do I become fluent in those love languages, speaking those things to myself and then how can I start incorporating those kind of things like in just like my day to day into like the way that like the business runs. Like for example, I'm a words of affirmation person. And so I needed to make sure that I had a system in the business that collected testimonials from the clients that I work with. Because essentially, those are little love notes that the business sends to me every time I work with a client. And that's one of the primary ways that I receive love, right? So, then, in a sense, my business is nurturing me that way and taking care of me that way because I've built my love language into it, right? So those are the things that the book walks you through.
Oh, that's wonderful. And yeah, I love this part because I never connected the two, but it is the way you said it, love from the business back to you.
Yes.
Nurturing, you said. I love that because we all need to have those. And I don't know how many listeners already do have that practice, right? Um, but I know in the tough times, it helps to go back to those, right? And just reaffirm, okay, and this is why I'm doing this. And I love that. I love how you brought this analogy of that side of self-care.
No, thank you.
I haven't
Because
connected that before. Yeah.
yeah, you're right. Like, collecting testimonials, like that's not groundbreaking, like business practice, right? It's
Yeah.
something that we should all do.
Yeah.
But when you really mentally and purposely connect it to this, I'm doing this to take care of me, like it changes things and there's a different kind of celebration and acknowledgement of it because it's like this is not just something that the business does. This is a thing that it does to take care of me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I usually like to ask this question, and we are on Women of the World Network
Yes.
podcast. We have women from all over the world, of course, and I want to ask you, what does it mean for you to be a woman of the world in business?
That's such a great question. For me, it means that I can model a way as another woman of having everything that I want in life, enjoying life the way that I want to enjoy it, but not adhering to like what culture tells me that I should have, like what busyness tells me that I should have. Um, and I'm able to just kind of be okay because I'm important enough to take care of, right? It's being able to model that for myself, model it for my clients, and really model it for anybody that's connected to me because, I had heard once that like people are paying attention even if you don't know it, right? So it's like the way that it's not just something that I'm preaching, it's something that I'm living, right? So even if like you never work with me, I'm able to still model and say, hey, there's another way over here to do this thing where you have a different, sense of like happiness and fulfillment and joy, and you're not resenting the work that you do every day.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Beautiful. And the cultural upbringing that you kind of touched on and what we grew up knowing sometimes no longer might not apply and being able to shift those to our own advantage. I love that
Yeah.
because and it's so applicable here because we have so many, and I myself grew up in a different culture. And so I know it totally know and understand how sometimes it's unlearning as well as learning.
Yes.
you
It's
know.
both for sure.
Okay, so we're going to move to the final part of our conversation, rapid
Okay.
fire questions.
Yes, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Beautiful. Okay. Your favorite book name is?
Like any book,
Yep.
any
And-
book, The Hunger Caterpillar. It's a children's book. It's a
Oh,
children's book
okay.
that that it's
I
one
love
of the
it.
very first books that I bought for my son. I love it. I adore it. Yeah, The Hunger Caterpillar.
Oh, beautiful. Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Okay. Favorite international destination to visit?
Toronto.
Hmm. It's on my list. Haven't been.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Summer or winter?
Winter.
Okay, and the final question is things that you have discovered about yourself recently.
That there's strength and vulnerability.
Beautiful. Thank you for playing.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, LaVista, for being here with us today, for taking the time. I really, truly enjoyed this conversation. And I know we're going to share a couple of links to how to connect with you, get a quick snapshot of your book, I believe,
Mhm.
all of those links. Connect to LaVista. She's doing amazing work. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.